All right, 737+ everybody is the phone number if you would like to call in tonight on Open Line. Becky Stoll and Lisa Agabine are here from Centerstone as we talk about crisis and disaster management, talk about natural disasters, and Philip earlier called in about tornadoes, and 5 years ago when the floods hit, we got hit pretty hard here at News Channel 5, as many people know. It was just one of those freak things. And what a lot of you may not know is, the bottom floor here at the station, we're kind of on a hill off of James Robertson Parkway. That's where our newsroom is, and other editing operations and whatnot. And it's way down in the basement, we call it, a bunker style. And it flooded. Oh. And what happened was, it was actually the sewer lines backed up. So it wasn't actually rainwater that was coming into the building. It was the whole sewage system in the whole city, whatever, in this area.
Oh my gosh. Backed
up, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
So we had to evacuate the entire newsroom. This happened on a Sunday morning, so it had been raining all day Saturday. We were already kind of covering. We knew that there were problems out there. Oh. We had to come in. It was all hands on deck.
Right.
Come in and move computers, anything, get them up high, away from the floor, unplug, and get everything upstairs. And we literally had to stay on the air while we were doing this. So it was a remarkable achievement in that, we all chipped in and just did what we had to do immediately. Right. And for 1 year after that, the hallways on this floor were filled with tables, and we just kind of made a makeshift wherever we could find space. We plugged in computers, and we just kept going.
Right.
But after about a month or two, when everything settled down, I could see, people were mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted.
Right.
Just after all that adrenaline and everything, and you realize what the impact. And we had a big staff meeting, and we were all just kind of, wow, what do we do now? So we talked about after something happens.
Right.
And we've seen this last week at the TV station in Roanoke, where they all got together for prayers and vigils and meetings and whatnot. But that's hugely important too. It's almost like I mentioned too, that for personal, meet at the tree or whatever. If there's a fire in the house, you tell your kids, have a meeting spot, or your neighbors or whatever. But tell us about the post-incident response and why that's so important.
And I think what you just described is exactly what you see after, especially a significant event like that, is people become very operational.
Oh yeah.
And so you're able to take your feelings about it and your emotional response to it, and you really just set that aside in a parking lot, because it's easy to do what we do, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know how to read the news, and
we just went about and just did it, and we're so proud of our. Look at us, we are rocking it.
Right. Yeah. And then it all subsides, and everybody goes back to their normal lives, and people aren't chipping in and helping anymore. And that's when what you've set in the parking lot creeps itself over and taps you on the shoulder.
Right.
And so oftentimes I think people are very baffled by that, is, gosh, everybody seemed to be doing so well. We rallied, look at us, a whole month went by, and then bam, it'll hit, because I think you allow yourself to become in a way that's not operational, which is more of an emotional, and that's when you see people fall apart and cry and do some of the things that are normal. But I think the important thing after an event is that people, if it starts feeling uncomfortable to the point that they feel like they need help, or if it becomes where they can't function, then that's when they need, it's going a little bit beyond what would be normal given the abnormal nature, and people need to reach out and try to get some help. Otherwise it can develop into diagnoses that people want to try to avoid.
It's almost likened to when someone passes away. And there's so much activity to do, planning of a funeral and this and that, and people coming in from out of town, and the funeral, the memorial service after, and family stay for a day or two, and then all of a sudden everyone's gone. Right. And I saw this years ago when my mom passed, and I kind of watched my dad go through all the motions, and then everyone's gone, and all of a sudden it's quiet, and that's when the wave really hit.
Exactly.
And you got to be prepared, for like, here comes the real grief. You haven't felt grief yet, and now you got to go back to the day-to-day without this person. Same with work. If you lose a coworker.
Absolutely. It's a new reality, and we say that a lot when we go out for responses, is once the event occurs, it's a new reality, and sometimes that reality is minus a coworker because there's been a death, or it's a new reality where maybe you're not in this building anymore because it had been so damaged and you would have to, it's a different reality. New reality is not comfortable. We get used to them, and sometimes they can be better, but in real time, Lisa and I talk about that, trying to get people to their new reality.
And it can be more impactful depending on the size of the disaster or the crisis. You were talking about the flood. That took months, even years to recover from, And when events impact people in a pretty substantial way, it takes a while to come back from that. The other part is that we have access to media 24/7. So even if we aren't directly seeing a specific event, oftentimes, we have access to what that event has occurred. So our reality looks very similar to somebody's reality in Virginia or somebody's reality in New York.
Right. We mentioned at the top of this broadcast, you talked about some of the holes that need to be filled.
Yes.
What are some of the simple things that a company or a business can do right off the bat? Is it communication? Is it, hey, we need to update our emergency contacts list and get all the employees to double check, because a lot of times that information is so out of date, or talk about this, we need to know where your kids going to schools. Let's get a forum together. Is it something as simple as that? Is it a phone tree where we're going to communicate in the event of a crisis? This is who's going to call whom and be in contact?
I think some of those simple things are exactly that you have. If you can get 3 emergency contacts, I think that's wonderful. 2, okay, but if you could get 3, knowing where kids go to school, having, I don't even know that you have to write a lot of policies, but did you have some kind of process for notifying employees about a death? We've seen employees go out on their lunch hour and get hit and killed in a vehicle accident and just not show back up. How are you going to tell the employees if something like that happens? We've been to companies where they just, an employee had died overnight, and there's just a sign up on the door that says, Joe died. That's not a great way to, or we've seen blast emails go out while employees are working, and that's not a great way. So how do you do, any company,
tactful, respectful sort of way.
And any company has the likelihood of a death by suicide, natural causes, expected. So I think knowing how you're going to do that, and again, how do you get their belongings to the family? A lot of times staff want to do a lot of memorializing. What's your policies around that? Because once you start doing that for one employee, you better be prepared to do.
Be consistent.
If you plant a tree, you better be ready to plant a tree for everybody. So you need to be a little bit purposeful, and sometimes good intention can get in the way of that.
How long, the training that you offer to businesses, how long does it depend on what they need, or does it depend on what you uncover in the beginning of what needs to be done?
I think probably what you uncover, but I don't think it's, you're probably talking an hour or 2 of training, a really good training that has spread like wildfire across the U.S. and really around the world is mental health first aid. And it's just Lisa's our instructor for the adult and the children's version of that. And it's a wonderful kind of mental health 101. So it's for the general public, and it tells you this is what, I'll let Lisa describe it more, but what does depression look like? What does anxiety look like? Here's what you need to look out for in the people you love and care about. And if you see these things, here's what you should do with that.
Well, and there's so many businesses out there who provide the medical first aid. We're all very well versed in what that looks like. When we're talking about mental health or mental illness, what does that look like?
It's hard. I think back to the situation at the TV station in Roanoke, and they talk a lot about this employee who, for various reasons was fired, anger issues and whatnot. It's hard for folks they're afraid to point fingers.
Right. Right.
And then after the fact, they all say, I knew it. I knew that it doesn't surprise me one bit that this person snapped, and I knew that this person was on the edge. And how can we get over that and not be afraid to say, hey, I think this person needs some help, and we want to prevent this something bad from happening, whether they hurt themselves or hurt others.
Right.
And that's really the idea behind mental health first aid, is to recognize what signs and symptoms exist out there and then be able to approach somebody in a non-judgmental way, a non-confrontational way, to help them through, you know, whatever mental concern they may have. And that's, you know, hopefully gets them to the right place, very similar to how if somebody has a medical concern, we've learned medical first aid and we're able to bandage them up until we can get them to the appropriate professional help.
Do you find at these training sessions, once you get people to open up and start talking about this issue, that it's a lot easier?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What we end up finding is that we'll get pulled aside at the, you know, at any break that we have and say, oh my gosh, you know, my cousin Joe, he really is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody, that might be too much of a generalization, but I mean, everybody knows someone that's got depression or anxiety, or almost every time we do a training, someone will pull you aside. They've had a suicide touch their lives. Almost everyone has had that. So I think it does open it up, and it makes it okay to kind of talk about that, because there's wonderful treatments for mental health.
Absolutely.
Just got to get people to them to get the help they need.
Yeah. All right. With that, we're going to take our final break, everybody. We'll be back to wrap it up with some contact information. We'll be right back.